Russia will claim that this is a massive victory, as they always do. But the Ukrainian people have in their hearts, they no. They told me last night, they said, one person told me, well, we didn't give it to them. We just left and we'll be back.
How bad is the situation for Ukraine this morning?
Oh, it's terribly worrisome. Um, there not only is there attrition of the actual forces here to fight, but also they don't have enough ammunition or munitions to even use the weapons that Europe has. Europe and the United States and our international partners has actually given. So defending themselves is becoming really difficult without additional aid.
I mean, you mentioned the US there. What is your sense on whether that $60 billion package of military aid will arrive in Ukraine? I mean, Joe Biden has promised it. We know it's been held up. What's the situation there?
It is held up. That's why I'm here. I wanted to provide some reporting to help our Congress make some different decisions. They have gone on a 2-week break without voting on the Senate bill that has passed that money. Now it's down to the House, and that's always where the tension has been among the Republicans in the House. Again, like I said, they're on a 2-week vacation, so that really irritated Joe Biden. Joe Biden really wanted them to stay and work on it. But they're back home in their districts, and hopefully when they get back, I think that will be the first thing that they take up in their agenda.
And do you think it's likely that they will agree it? I mean, you say they're sort of going back to their local districts. They're reflecting, obviously, on more than just this. But Ukraine can't really afford to wait for America to make its mind up.
Absolutely, they cannot wait. They need to know now, and they need to have the ability to plan out their future forces. Um, I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I wish I had a better assessment of what Congress is going to do here. I would say, however, um, there is an option where right now the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, won't put this bill on the table on the House floor up for a vote. There is a procedural alternative. It takes a while, but if you can get a certain number of representatives in the House, 218, you can push this bill to the floor for a floor vote. And I think once it gets to the floor, it will be passed. It's just a matter of getting it to the floor. Because once you get it to the floor, all of the Democrats will vote for it. Most of the Democrats will vote for it. And you can get a large chunk of the Republican Party who still really supports Ukraine.
Yeah. You are obviously there in Kyiv. I mean, what's the mood like there among people that you're speaking to? What's their feeling about how the West is supporting them, not supporting them? Do they feel like, America, the UK, Europe still has their back, or are they getting frustrated with the response?
Yeah, I keep hearing that word frustrated, and it's just not the word to describe what I'm experiencing here. It's utter fear and desperation. It's not so much, gosh darn it, give us more. It's about, thank you so much for anything you can give us. Thank you so much. I mean, it just shows the good spirit of the Ukrainian people. I would say that they are in fear. They're just in fear, and they live their lives every day with threat of bombs. I've been taught how to go into shelters and what to listen for when there's a missile heading in our direction. I think that they just want to be heard, and they definitely want that support from the West. And I think what the Denmark woman said was interesting, and I think maybe the West should. I'll be interested to see if the West follows her lead.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking this morning about Avdiivka, which is, a city that Russia has taken. Ukraine says that the reason for that is because it didn't have enough artillery to defend that city. It is fairly symbolic. What's your assessment of what this means now in terms of where things stand between Russia and Ukraine on that front line?
Um, you know, I think this was a decision based on, yes, on the lack of ammunition. Also, they're running out of troops, and they needed to save those troops' lives. They pulled them out, and the Ukrainians that I've talked to are all glad of that. But they say they haven't pulled out forever. They will be back for that territory. I think that Russia will claim that this is a massive victory, as they always do. But the Ukrainian people have in their hearts, they like know. They told me last night. They said, one person told me, "Well, we didn't give it to them. We just left, and we'll be back."
Yeah. Caitlin Doornbos, thank you for giving us that update there from Ukraine. Caitlin writes for the New York Post.
It's an interesting point, though, because it's 2 years now, more or less, since the invasion, isn't it? And there is this feeling. We talked to a lot of Americans on this program. You must have done the same thing, Kate, where it just feels like in America, this is not a hot topic. And if it becomes a topic, it's really to be dismissive of Ukraine rather than pro-Ukraine. It's not going to be a big electoral issue. But no if Donald Trump is the next president, he's going to have no interest in supporting a war in Ukraine. You do wonder how this ends, don't you? That we've gone through such different emotions, whereas that the feeling of fear at the beginning, and this feel, well, maybe Ukraine can stand up to Russia, and then it feels the last year it's been much more downbeat news coming out of Kyiv and places like that.
Well, I think it's the reality of politics. It's when principles meets with, what's actually happening in all of these countries. I mean, that there is a reason why the conversation in the UK, Europe and America is now far more hesitant about the level of support that Ukraine needs. It's because people expected this war would be over quickly, or at least more quickly than it looks like it will be. They didn't expect to have to commit to the amount of support in cash terms that they are going to have to keep doing. And there's been a huge economic impact on everybody's own, people. On cost of living crisis is something that is affecting all of these countries involved, and that becomes very difficult to stick to your principles.
Do you get a sense, though, because in America it feels that's very much happening, and we've had a Republican on this show saying we've spent $200 billion on Ukraine and we're just not willing to do that anymore, and it's a problem for Ukraine and a problem for Russia. It's not a problem for America. Do you sense that in Britain? It feels to me that Britain remains relatively robust on all sides of the political spectrum.
Relatively robust. I think in terms of the principle of supporting Ukraine, there is absolutely no wavering from that. But you've got to remember that the UK committed to its package of support for Ukraine a couple of months, I think, after it was supposed to do. There was definitely a bit of back and forth inside government about the level of support, where that would be, how that money would be spent. You had the former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace saying, tell them now what you're going to commit to. Ukraine it can't wait around. You need to tell them if we're going to back them like you've promised we would. So I think, interventions from former Prime Minister Boris Johnson along very similar lines. So although there isn't a hesitancy in terms of our principal support, I think there is a question about the economics of it. The really interesting thing will be what happens if Donald Trump does become president again. And even if he doesn't, will this dominate the election campaign? You are already seeing this conversation about NATO, about whether NATO is stepping up enough, whether NATO is still relevant. Keir Starmer, for example, wading into that row over the weekend. If that becomes one of the biggest kind of points of that election, it will bleed over into politics here. And that NATO question actually is a really, really important one. And all of the countries in Europe will have to look to themselves and answer it.